Tuesday, April 9th, City Council work session. Call to order, and I need approval of the agenda.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes?
Okay, jumping right into it. I think we have an introduction.
Yes, sir. I'll ask Lori to come up here and introduce Timo Ertz.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor,
Evening.
councilors. I'm really very pleased tonight to introduce our new Assistant Finance Director, Timo Ertz. He comes to us from the OLCC. He was the controller there. And so he's jumping right into the job, and he's been here about a week and 2 days. And I've got him budgeting, and we met with the state lodging this week to talk about the RV park, and so he's been doing a great job for us. He's born in Germany and speaks German, so then if you want to, I don't know if
Did a
you
little
speak
practice.
German, but
Well,
It's great. It's great. It's good being here. Really appreciate this opportunity. I started in City Government. I went to school in Austin, Texas. Started with the city auditors there, and then went to California, did tech and biotech, and finally did that back here about 6 years ago. So I'm very excited to be able to do this. Been looking forward to moving out to the coast and finally being out here. So
Great.
appreciate it.
and down to place in San Beach to live.
My God.
Really? How'd you do that?
Yeah, it was
Wow.
I got lucky. But, yeah. No, it's great. It's a great town, and really look forward to working with all of you. Welcome.
Welcome, Timo.
welcome, Timo. Thank you very much, Lori. Well done. Got somebody else in the front office.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next item is going to be a report from the Emergency Management Operations Center with Mike.
Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Mike Meyer. I'm the emergency manager for the city of Cannon Beach. Tonight, we'll be talking about kind of an update on emergency management. This generated from a question that was given to us from the council from Commissioner McCarthy a month ago.
Several months ago.
Several months ago, right? About the EOC needs, Emergency Operations Center needs, and what we might need in the new city hall, or city hall, in an emergency. So I'll cover that. I'll cover that tonight. Thank you, Colleen.
Do you have the clicker, Mike?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to grab it here. Perfect. So I thought I'd start off and just have a general discussion about what we are facing. And I could have talked about anything. Emergencies come in all different kinds of flavors and sizes. And we could talk about bad weather, winter storm. We could talk about loss of power for a week. We could talk about some flooding, a landslide. Those are all small emergencies. But tonight I'm really going to talk a little bit more about earthquake and tsunami. And the reason I'm going to talk about that is it rolls all of those different emergencies into one, right? We'll see all of those things when you have a earthquake or tsunami. So I beg my pardon as I go along, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because that is one of those things I know that is important for coastal communities. So we know what a small event is, and I would categorize even 2007's windstorm in this small category. It is a little bit disruptive. If we were looking at earthquake and tsunami, a small tsunami might be a distant tsunami along the Indonesian coast or the Japanese coast or the Alaskan coast. It gives us some time. We wouldn't really feel the shaking, but we certainly would have some small inundation. I've provided these maps are identical, and they're really here for you afterward to kind of come around and look at your leisure. I'll have them out other evenings when we're here so people can kind of take a look at and kind of refresh your memory. But the dark purple areas are small inundations. Some of you experienced it or may have read about it in 1964. There may be people here in the audience that experienced it. I was able to get my hands on some photographs of the 1964 tsunami and some of the results afterward. That would be considered a small event. We don't think there'll be any casualties in an event like that. We'll have plenty of notice to get people out of the way, but we can't stop the inundation and some of the harm it might do to some of our structures. in a medium, and so the small, and then of course the medium and large, these are the most likely events that will impact us. You know, I've heard this over and over and over, that we're not overdue for an incident, but we're certainly due for some sort of earthquake, tsunami event. But the likelihood of what we would experience is either small, a medium, or a large. And so we'll focus in on those three types. A medium and large, that would involve some shaking here on the ground, and we've certainly experienced that. The earthquake. We could see some structural damage here. About 46 to almost 50% of our structures here in Cannon Beach are pre-code. When we say pre-code, those are pre-1976 age buildings. And so they have a little higher potential for some damage than some of the buildings that have been built more recently. And so we may, with the earthquake, also experience landslides, right? And we may experience some form of tsunami. We don't know how bad that will be, but you've seen some displays of some inundation here in more of the light purple. You gonna hold that up for me, Chris?
You've got such a great presentation here, Michael. I want to make sure they can see it.
Thank you. And so, and we have some of those common things we thought about. You know, the bridge is an issue. I know we've been talking a lot at the City Hall about our concrete water tanks failing, and just the water lines that would break during a shake, and all of the underground infrastructure, gas lines to water lines and down power lines. These are all things that we consider, and something we need to think about anytime the earth is going to shake for a period of time. Okay, so that's your medium to large. We would expect some casualties in that type of level of an event. And then certainly the XL, double XL is certainly frightening thought. We're looking at maybe 7, 15% timeline or percentage of a possible opportunity for something like this. Those are extreme. Those are your light and darker yellow inundations. And so we're definitely looking at pretty heavy shake. Those are very high magnitude, a lot of inundation, landslides, a lot of infrastructure loss. And one thing we'll talk about here in a little bit is some probably widespread fires from natural gas disruption. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So what will it be like here in Cannon Beach? Depending on the level of the incident, we can expect large number of casualties across the entire coast, especially when it's a no-notice event. From the shaking alone, from the destruction from an earthquake, caused the casualties. Certainly landslide, if you look at the landslides data from Dogami, it's readily available. Most of you know, if you live in a landslide-prone area already, when it's a no-notice event, there's no time to escape something like that. The tsunami, we think, time frames are relatively short, 15, 20 minutes. That's a serious inundation. There are portions of the community that just don't have good evacuation routes. They're there, they exist, but the time frame from where you're at your home to actually get to safety can be quite a distance. And then, of course, we're plumbed with natural gas from the North Coast, which concerns me as well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So we can expect that widespread structural damage. We've talked a lot about just the debris that will accumulate. If you watched any video on what a tsunami can do, it brings a lot of tidal sand ashore. The city manager had asked us the other day, at least asked Karen from Public Works and her team, to get lat longs of where our valves are. We won't actually have to dig for them. We're not going to be able to. The landscape will be covered. And a lot of down trees, moved buildings, and a lot of disruption, a lot of debris. It'll make travel almost impossible. And I think it's important for us to discuss this point. People think about getting in their cars and leaving, or the fire truck can get out of the fire station, it'll come and save me. We don't know that the fire truck will even be able to leave the garage, let alone make a right down the street and not be obstructed by down power lines and down trees and sand and water and all the other things. We just need to be realistic about what we may or may not face. Even in a small shake, we will have a lot of down power lines and down trees. The ability to be mobile with vehicles won't exist. And the work for Karen and her team quadruples overnight, right? In an instant. We're certainly moving to debris removal immediately. And And then limited public safety response, I think, is something we should talk about as well. I come from the fire service. I spent 31 years in the fire service, about 15 years as a fire chief in Las Vegas and then in Portland. And you couldn't turn your head without seeing an ambulance. And there's a department every block. When I often walk through Cannon Beach, or I'm leaving for work at night or coming in the morning, I very rarely do I see a medics ambulance here in Cannon Beach. I see them in Seaside all the time, but I don't see them here in Cannon Beach. I don't have a resident ambulance company here, right? We have a fire department, and they can come and certainly help. We have a handful of police officers we think may be in town during an event, but that's it. And it is not uncommon for smaller communities to have mutual aid with their neighbor, right? We have an incident here, we have a fire, you may get a Seaside fire truck and a Nehalem Bay fire truck to come up and help put the fire out, and we go there. But during an event like this, where we're cut off, when we're truly isolated, we'll only have what we have here, right? It'll be just us together as a team looking to take care of this. Nobody's coming from Seaside over here. There's going to be difficult with Seaside residents, which they should. And nobody's coming from Nehalem Bay or Manzanita. They'll be busy in Manzanita and Nehalem Bay. So we'll really have what we have here, right, as a team to kind of take care of this issue. So we'll have a pretty limited public safety response. The utility disruption it was interesting, Commissioner, you and I were at that meeting the other day, at the Natural Hazard Mitigation Program meeting in Astoria. And there was a lot of talk about the disruption of buildings, like how many buildings might fail, and there's a draft report getting ready to be released by Lugani, which will talk about the percentage of likelihood of buildings that will fail during a medium, a large, and an extra large. Pretty much, they've got some formula they worked out. And the meeting was about ready to close, and we kind of stopped and said, look, that's concerning, that we have a lot of pre-code buildings out there that will fail, but I also know we've got a lot of pre-code infrastructure that we've laid down years and years and years ago. We put a lot of plumbing into the earth, right? We put a lot of water line into the earth. We put a lot of wastewater management into the earth. And when that earth shakes, it's just going to fracture all of that, right? And we're going to lose water supply. And that water supply, you can build a building back in 6 months to a year, you can put a building back up. But to carve up all of the water supply for Cannon Beach, and to carve up all of the wastewater transportation system for Cannon Beach, and the regular outflow for regular water that we have, that's all underground. That all has to be dug up and replaced. And that's no small infrastructure cost. Right? Those are big dollar items, and that takes years to get done. And so I think it's important to think about, just know about those things. And even with natural, with power, down power lines happen all the time. I think we had a power loss here in the city last week, I think, and Pacific Power is pretty responsive. We had it repaired in a couple of hours, pretty good eye on it. A few of you may have been without power for just a little bit of time. That's not unusual, no matter where you live in the United States, to have a bit of a power outage. But during a big event, we lose power here on the coast, and it's affected the entire west coast of Oregon and Washington and California. Those roads are blocked, and those power companies aren't going to be able to get in here real quick. And we kind of saw that, I think, in 2007, didn't you? Didn't we lose power for about a week in a windstorm, right? In a windstorm. So kind of just think about the magnitude of Oregon we're talking about, or that we potentially could be talking about here. Failure communications, I think, I think we will have some, it says most communications, I think we will have some communications. The city does own a handful of satellite phones for us to communicate back and forth with. I have been extremely impressed with ham operators from the day ham was invented, right? We always know, I feel this confidence that no matter what the disaster, we have some people that we can fall back on. And we have a very strong ham group here in the city of Cannon Beach and along the coast of Oregon. Lieutenant Chris Wilbur is here tonight. Lieutenant Wilbur is our communication lead for Cannon Beach, and he politely accepted the assignment. So we had a good discussion a couple of weeks ago, and he's going to take that on for us. We've got a lot of really professional ham operators in the area. So I know we can have some communication and we can keep those things charged. A little more concerned, obviously, about cellular and internet and those kinds of things. We don't have a lot of confidence in that, but we shall see. second thing with communication is, in every event that I personally have ever managed, I've managed a lot of disasters, at the very end of it, when the after-action report comes back out, it's never pretty. You burn down a building, it's never that was great, chief. There's always a lot of things to talk about. And at the end of the day, it's always, the number one issue is always communication, right? It's always something failed in communications, whether it's internal communications between staff or communication with different divisions of different battalions, but ultimately it's a failure in communication. And we really are going to try to focus and make sure that we have good intergroup communication with our neighbors in the different zones of the community, with our catch sites, and then of course with our public safety partners and city staff. Fires with gas leaks, and this is not because I'm a fire professional. This is just something that's not being talked about a lot along the West Coast. California seems to have a really good grasp on this. There's a lot of city and county ordinances that require seismic gas shutoff valves. I don't know where we're at here along the Oregon coast. I know I've had a few conversations with the gas company, and I'm yet to get to the person that's going to tell me exactly what's going on. But it sounds like to me the closest shutoff may be St. Helens. That's a long ways away. If I remember right, that's a long ways away. It's a lot of gas from there here to spill out between broken gas lines, and gas, having a flammable gas floating around in multiple fractions amongst your community doesn't set well. And some of the California cities who frequently have earthquakes have put in the seismic gas shutoff valves and have fared better as of late in the last couple of decades than they did before, when they didn't have the gas shutoff valve. And so that's just something I want you to keep aware of. This isn't one fire that starts somewhere and then you can go put it out. These are multiple pop-ups everywhere, and it ends up being a conflagration. And so those are just concerns that I have.
What would cause them to unite?
The fires?
Unite, yeah.
Ignite?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there are a number of things. So, it's not all fire. Not all gas, natural gas that causes fire. The numbers look to be about a third of the time. So it is often sparking of electrical also that can start fires. But any kind of residual flame, if pilot lights, anything else can start, a gas fire. Now, you would think with a lot of water around, there wouldn't be any fire. It's not the case. If you look at video footage of tsunamis, there are actually fires even on the water. It's lighting all of the oils and fuels that are mixing upon the water that's floating on top, and it actually lights there as well. Very, very difficult to control. And that gas will bubble up right through the water. Food and water shortages. I thought this was interesting. Bruce, your city manager, and I were talking about what should we include on the slide set so people should kind of know. And the governor, when I arrived in Portland a few years ago, I came from Las Vegas, so I hadn't experienced that. I didn't know what Cascadia meant. When I arrived here, there was a lot of talk about being 72 hours ready. Do you remember that? People telling you being 72 hours ready? And then as I live here and I get to Cannon Beach and I'm listening to the governor talk, and that's 72 hours, they don't say that anymore. What are they telling us now? 2 weeks ready. Might be 2 weeks ready. And so, I think from a coastal city standpoint, I get it. I understand if I live in Portland and my home has been involved in an earthquake and the power is out and the grocery stores are closed and the food's not there, and I need to hunker down for 2 weeks in my home, and then the power will be back on and the grocery stores will be full of food again, and I can go to the grocery store. 2 weeks ready makes sense. But if I live on the coast and I'm in Cannon Beach and that earthquake happens, I'm not staying in my home. You're told to do what? It shakes, go to high ground. You leave, and you take that 72-hour factory back, and you go to high ground, right? And you leave your 2 weeks ready back at your house that may or may not be there when you get back. So being 2 weeks ready on the coast is a little bit different lift. And so I think about this, and I know that we have a responsibility as government, and governing the city. I think the expectations of a resident or a person that would come here on visit is that I would expect the city to make sure there's shelter for me, right? We do that through affordable housing, we do that for other housing options, shelters if somebody needed it. I want to make sure that we have fresh water to drink. That's something we do every day. We're making sure it happens today. Fresh water to drink. It's potable and we can drink it. And I imagine we also expect to have good wastewater management and good hygiene here, right? We want to be able to move everything away and pump it out and treat it and take care of it. And we expect that as residents, don't we? That responsibility as a city exists today as we sit here right now. If the event occurred tomorrow, that responsibility doesn't change, right? That responsibility still exists. It's how much and how well can we provide that service, right? And so we have some responsibility. We have it today. We will have some responsibility afterward. And you think about, you have all lived this all the time. You're probably well prepped and ready to go. But for only a certain amount of time. You can only carry so much on your back. I can only carry so much on my back. And then we also do have a responsibility for the guests that do come to Cannon Beach. And they are not coming, even 72 hours already. Right? They're coming here to enjoy themselves. They're not thinking about that. We had a really good conversation today at Chamber of Commerce. I thought it was just a really good conversation about lodging being ready and what's the potential for a business owner to be ready in case they have workers there and they may not be ready. So the conversation is happening. But food and water, if we have enough shaking, we're not confident that the water tanks will even be seismically ready, right? So there's a potential to lose water. So we are working on making sure that we have options for fresh water and these kind of things afterward. That's what the way hibernate, right? We're trying to plan that out. And then we know, this is obvious, that we'll have local and regional roadway disruption. What you might not know is all the roads have been labeled primary, secondary, and tertiary routes. Primarily meaning that when the state afterwards, they look down at the road structure, they've already planned, like, these roads will be worked on first. These roads will be worked on second, and these roads will be worked on third. And the ones that are worked on first, thank you. These that are worked on first, I was always taking care of me. The roads that will be worked on first, or what do you think? High five, the I-5 corridor, your biggies, right? And then what do you think the tertiary roads will be?
26.
Yeah, it's going to be the roads that are running right outside here. Which, Bruce and I talked a lot about this, about getting pre-existing contracts in place that allow contractors, if this, then this. So if you feel the shake and it's a magnitude of such and such, go ahead and start moving debris and fix the roadway. Don't wait for a call from Myers to get going and start working out procurement with finance. Let's just get going. Let's do it ahead of time. Right away, we'll work those contracts out ahead of time. So, I think I've hopefully shared enough with you to understand that we're going to really be alone here for probably 2 weeks. And I'm an optimist. So in 2 weeks, I know we can do this, right? And it's about building a really, really good team here. But I know we can do this. But this is what I truly think we need to face the reality on the potential maybe that we would be here greater than 2 weeks. From the council perspective, this is a critical take-home slide. When Bruce and I talked about what do we really want to tell them, we want you to understand at this point here. And this is I have 2 slides that they both say the same thing. This is the first one. Anything that gets done will be accomplished by city staff, which you only have, 20, Bruce?
Yeah, but they won't all be here.
That's true. Will be accomplished by city staff, heroic volunteers, and you've got a lot of them, and they're growing in number, which is fantastic. And contractors, which we are dependent upon, right? We're all going to be dependent on some of these really skilled contractors out there. All of whom are also victims. All that families and homes and livelihoods as well, under the leadership and coordination of the City Emergency Management, using only the resources on hand at the time. So what we have here today in Cannon Beach, we're going to make do with, right? And it's going to be all of us working as a team. Those 3 groups, your city staff, the volunteers, and those contractors. Very hard slide to read. I'll read them to you, don't worry. So what will we need to be done post-event? And the reason it's hard to read, and the reason there's so much on this slide is we couldn't list all of it. And this kind of gets to your point, Commissioner, on like what do you need? What are we doing? What do we need? A emergency EOC, Emergency Operations Center. How would we do that? And I'm going to lay the context first before going to the list. There are 2 types. There are 2 main types of emergency operations centers out there. And I've worked in both of them. There are big city emergency operations centers that stand alone. They're their own building, their own floor, their own screens. They run 24-hour-a-day operations because they're handling major problems 24 hours a day. Las Vegas, Portland, those are big emergency management centers. We do not need a big standalone emergency operations center. Did I get that right, Bruce? Unless you wanted one. We don't need one, right? Let's just be honest. We're not that. We don't need that. The second way an emergency operations center runs is it runs as a second use space of existing space. For instance, this is city council. Today we're using it for city council chambers. I think I've seen 3 meetings going on here today of different committees that met in this room. And there's the staff conference room, and then there's everybody's offices, right? Public Works back there, Finance has their group back there, I have my little office in there. We all have our offices where we work. During the day, in normal operations, this is great. We have an emergency and everything changes overnight, this thing flips. This is no longer the council chambers, this is the emergency operations center. That room becomes the policy room where you all meet with the city attorney and Bruce and write policy and get us out of this mess. And everybody else goes to their offices and starts doing work. Right? We just flip the use of the building. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail in a couple of slides. But basically, you can read some of this for yourself. I'll go over it. We're basically going to be coordinating all the responder efforts right out of this facility here. Now, there's a lot of autonomy out there. You know, we're changing the way we're doing business here at Cannon Beach. Like the CERT teams are not going to come here and wait for direction. We're giving them the autonomy to go out and start work in their areas, right? We're going to let them start working based on what I call standing orders. A mission intent is to start working. And they'll be out there doing damage assessments, assessing the situation, making radio contact back with us as we log that information, and I get it to the county, and I start making those requests, those order requests. Because all that has to funnel up through the state to the feds. There'll be multiple search and rescues going on. You know, there's going to be a lot of people out there asking for help on the radio. Hey, we need this, we need this, we need this. We coordinate it out of this room. We'll have a planning section, logistics, finance, operations, all running out of this room. The event, the rescue effort, the managing, coordinating, all this is one thing. But building the sheltering for people and receiving individuals, checking them in, talking with them, making sure they have a place now to sleep, that they have a bathroom and privacy to go to, meeting their special needs, making sure they know where the water's at, food's at, they get instruction on hygiene. That whole sheltering operation is like running a small camp, right? And it's no small lift. That alone takes a lot of coordination and effort. Good thing Lila's got that handled.
Need a shelter.
And then we've got to rebuild quickly makeshift temporary water supply and wastewater management. And there are solutions to that. Don't think any of this stuff as well as you painted such a grim picture, Mike. There's no way we can possibly overcome this. There is. There are societies around the world who have been impacted overnight by devastation, who have if they're prep ready enough, if they're drilled and exercise ready enough, and they're educated enough, and we have a moderate amount of funding to get it done, we can handle this situation. You can manage yourself out of it. There isn't one existing place in the United States in the world that I'm aware of who had a catastrophic event and they haven't at this point recovered. I mean, I was in Pompeii and it looks pretty cool. Have you been there? I mean, it really is. It's a neat place. I've seen it. So everybody at some point, you know, I don't want you to ever think, well, it'll be over, nothing will be here, we'll never go back, we'll never be able to rebuild, we won't have anything to go back to. It's not exactly the case. I don't know about maintaining order. That's a policing thing. I can't imagine with 2 or 3 officers here what that will be like. I'm always optimistic that people will be on their best behaviors. Establishing communications will be critical. I'm leaning heavily on satellite and our ham operators to get us out of this mess, but you know, we've still got to get back to where we can really start you know, getting back on the internet, getting our computers and getting things working again. That's what we're used to in the modern era, and that's how information and things are transferred sure that we get roads cleared. We'll be doing that, I largely believe, contracted services. I've had a lot of great discussions with different players here in the area. And I know that will be no small lift for them, but they sound game and ready to help. We've got to get basic human services back up, sheltering, food, and water. For finance, this will be huge. You know, I talk about all this stuff, and for those of you that are paying close attention, probably that sounds very expensive to do all this, and it is. And if you do it right, and you collect the amount of the staff hours that are putting into it, and the cost of the product that you're using, whether it's rock to lay down to create a road, or the fuel that you're using, or the equipment cost per hour, that's all reimbursable by FEMA once this is declared a disaster. And all assumptions would be that this would be declared a disaster, but we just need to be able to fill out the right forms and collect the right things from our contractors and from our city staff to get reimbursement from FEMA. So that's a very important part of this, and it's the boring part, I think, but we do need to do that. And then it's going to be constantly continuous assessment and reprioritization. I have never ran an incident based on how I thought it was going to go down. It never goes down that way. At the end of the day, I never thought, well, I was never expecting that. And that's just that we have to be able to be nimble, and that all happens during planning sessions right here. My intent is to run 24-hour operations. At the beginning, it'll be your city staff and the volunteers working 24 hours a day for a certain number of days. It's fun for about the first day or two, and then about day 3, 4, it actually becomes dangerous. My intent then is to shift over to 12-hour shifts. That means I need to put 2 incident management teams together, but running this place wherever we're at, 24 hours a day based on 2 12-hour shifts. I'm trying to put that team together. It'll be made up of staff and volunteers. So, commissioners, gets to your point then. What do we need in EOC? If that's the case, if it could be that bad, or we need to be able to manage anything from a very small event, which Karen and her team and Lieutenant does regularly every day. We manage small events, all the way up to something that would be a very high magnitude. What do we need to run that? What physical space do we need? And I put a couple of things on here. We need a relatively, not completely undamaged, but we need a relatively undamaged and habitable space. We need emergency power. The actual location that we're running the emergency and coordinating the emergency out of can't be a defunct place, right? We've got to have generator power, some form of power. We need to have some form of communications. We have to be able to coordinate our group, the activities here. You all, as commissioners, council, governance has to continue, right? We have to continue to govern and provide governmental support for the city. There are going to be policies, declarations that need to be done where you all have to vote and sign. Those are legal binding documents. And all that has to be taking place with the city manager and your city attorney. That's what conference rooms are about, because you are the policy group, right? You're the ones that write the policy. I will be out in, Karen and Jeff and I will be out on operations in a different place. You'll be with Bruce and the city attorney writing policy. I may come in and tell you this is what we need, but you'll be largely drafting policy for the city as we move through this incident. So the office space for key players is ideal. I know I've run big operations that are outside of the, not on the scene. I feel most comfortable in my office because I'm right on my own computer. If you go in my office right now, it's just a 12 by 12 room or a 10 by 10 room with maps all over the wall, right? So I just want to know where every valve's at, where the lat longs for helicopter landing zones are at, where the timber routes are at. I need to have all that in front of my face. And if I'm operating out of a lunchbox in the front of my van somewhere off the street, I'm not going to have access to all that stuff. It just is really going to be cumbersome. Workspace to lay out plans, etc., for side meetings. Computer access and connectivity for city staff. Our intent is to get some form of computer access back up, even if we have to go to satellite to get up and out of Oregon. We'll do it. We're working on that right now. Quiet space for rest and feeding capabilities. Once I get, this whole team, when you get into the Emergency Operations Center, you typically don't go home. You run your 12-hour period, and then you go to wherever you're in some other place in the corner, or wherever you sleep your 12 hours, and and you come back and you work 12 hours more, and you just keep flipping that until, help from somewhere else comes, and that can, like we said, could be weeks. But you have to continue to eat, you have to continue to drink water, you have to go to the bathroom, you have to get some sleep. You can't run 24 hours a day, literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for weeks on end. You won't physically be able to do that, especially with the intensity of the decisions that you're going to be making. So I also think this is important that this includes all city staff, right? This is not just your operational public work people out moving product, or your police officers out policing. This is everybody. This is finance working 2 12-hour shifts. It's IT people working 2 12-hour shifts. It's Jeff's team from community development working 2 12-hour shifts. It's all of HRAP. Those are the individuals that work out at Haystack Rock, right? They do all of the interaction work out there with people that are visiting. They're so good at managing volunteers and people. We're going to put them in charge of managing, getting people that might want to, that are showed up, that might want to turn into volunteers quickly. We'll get them to kind of get educated and schooled up, and then turn them over to Mary Beth and I'm going to work. Get them out there and get them on the cert stuff, helping us out. And so, I would tell you that from my professional opinion, and I've only been here for maybe half a dozen discussions on the new City Hall site. I think that's where this discussion originated, like what do you need in the EOC? And so I think my answer to that would be, we don't need a whole building to run an EOC in Zurich. I don't think anybody's asking for that. I would certainly counter a request for that. I don't think that's necessary. I think the building that you build has the setup for the council area. It needs to be able to do dual role, right? Your conference room is dual role. Your office is dual role. That's all. Make the building a dual role building. And it's easy. Just you have to make sure there's a handful more outlets, and you can put some tables around. It's not, you might have to have some feeding opportunity and maybe a shower or two. Not much more. Right? We'll keep it simple. I would also, and I've been very quiet, responsibly, and rightfully so. And I'm going to take one liberty tonight. One liberty tonight. And that is to tell you, I would, on my professional opinion, the Emergency Operations Center should not be in the inundation zone. You should not purposely place the Emergency Operations Center in the disaster zone that you know highly likely that would be a disaster zone. Even for a a medium, it doesn't look good to have the Emergency Operations Center here. I just don't think that would, I don't know how that could possibly work. I'd have to be really coached on how we could possibly do that. And that's just my personal opinion. Okay? I'm not speaking for city staff. I'm speaking on when you asked me to come back and give a presentation, that would be my opinion. Okay? Not to put it inside the inundation zone. I just think that is a very bad move, and we would regret that in the end if something did occur. Again, this was your take-home message that Bruce and I talked about. Anything that gets done will be accomplished by city staff, heroic volunteers, and contractors under the leadership and coordination of City Emergency Management. And underlined here is using only the resources on hand at this time. We are not getting new resources. People aren't coming here for at least 2 weeks. And that's just not me talking. And that's me calling and asking. When would we get these helicopters full of goods? There's no helicopters full of goods coming in. And that's for 2 weeks. Okay? I just want that to be very clear. I want our expectations to be clear where we're on. That's why we need CERT members, and we've got to all be together on this deal. All right. Any questions or comments?
How safe do you think this building is if it was hardened, for instance? Whatever that might mean.
Hard to say. So when I talked to Bruce about my personal experience trying to, and I've never been in a tsunami. Right? I've never been even in an earthquake aftermath. I've just been in areas that have been gas explosions, other big fires. I can't imagine having this inundated with the sand and the debris here, and then trying to get teams to come back in here, make entry somehow, make it a usable space, and it not have the power of the wastewater or those things to being being right in the middle of the inundation zone. So safe, could you build the building to where it could survive an earthquake? I assume you could. I don't know that the walls are, I think these walls are actually unreinforced masonry. So I'm not even sure what hardening would mean other than maybe a tear down rebuild. But I'm not a contractor. I don't know.
And that's the problem, is that these are hollow tile walls, and so you could build another building all around this, and if something was to happen, we would all be crushed because the walls are going to come down. And if you try to build reinforcement on the outside, and then you connect it like some point with a bolt or something, then all the force, instead of being across that wall, is now in this little place here. So when we talk about hardening, I don't think that it's possible because we have to protect ourselves from the walls themselves. That's where the problem is going to be, and then they're supporting the roof structure and everything else.
And an area like this city council chambers, is this about the size of an area that you would need for operations center?
I think so. There are two things to consider in an operations center, like I should say in the event of an emergency. One is the size of the operations center. I think this is plenty size to run an operation out of. The one thing you need to be aware of, and my only experience in this is wildland fire. In the communities, you need to have a community meeting space. It's likely people are going to want to meet with you, probably with Bruce and I and maybe a representative from the council. We will be holding basically town hall meetings almost twice a day. And they're going to want to know constantly, like, what's happening, when can we go back, why is it taking so long, when are we going to get something better to eat, or when are you going to fix this, so you do need to have space for that. That can be outside under a tent, it can be another gathering area. In fact, it's best if it's not near the EOC. You don't want people, it really needs to be locked down, and there's a lot going on here. So I'd say yes, the space is large enough. Please consider how we might, my job is to figure that out, how we might have a town hall meeting. And so after the fact, after the emergency, people always say, well, the emergency's over, then what? The emergency, like, if you remember the 23rd Street explosion in Portland, I don't know if you remember. Yeah. I was on that call from a few minutes after it occurred, and that is still going on today. We're still meeting on plans and having discussions about on the construction of that. So when even after we maybe opened up the roads, your job is planning and your job is public works, and there's going to be a lot of people in here with contractors and permits and FEMA and small business loan people in here talking, and the chamber is going to want to start have a place to kind of like spin up. And we need to think about providing space for those things, those activities, as we get back into business to happen. They do need space to do those things, right? You're going to want your businesses to come in and sit down with business representatives from FEMA and start talking about small business and getting things operational. Your plans people are going to be plowing through a lot of plans. A lot of contractors knocking on your door, Karen, right? And so there's going to be a lot of other things going on even after we're like, okay, we got the roads open, and I think people can now go to the bathroom and the power's up. And it's going to be years of that, right?
I think, and I have maybe a little bit of a different idea, or maybe a definition of what we're talking about from the EOC. When I look at this room, I think that this would be minimal if we said, okay, if we were to build a standalone emergency operations center, and then City Hall would not exist, then this would be too small, because we're going to have so many people. Eventually you're having contractors, volunteers, everybody's coming through. I think that if you were going to convert a space and you still had the other spaces, like a conference room and people had offices and those kind of things, then probably the space that you would make is the overall space. A room of this size would probably be good enough. And it depends also, because I guess I'm thinking bigger. We had the chance to build a city hall, that when we're talking about a multi-purpose space, it doesn't necessarily have to be just a conference room. And one of the ideas that comes to mind, like I think if I was to ask Lila, where are you going to set up? She thought you...
I don't know yet.
Okay, there you go. Right, and so what I'm thinking is that, as Mike said, if we were out of the inundation zone, and we thought about it in advance, we would probably be able to go ahead and set aside a place that would all be offices, but potentially it could be a clinic. So that's the space that somebody could come, we would have, you know, the place, it would have electricity, all those kind of things, and we would, and then somebody, you know, like the MRC would have a place to work from, if we thought that through. Right now, if we have an event, I'm being told, and from what my experience, we will not have the use of this building. But if we were to build a place that was not going to go ahead and lose the first floor, and so all the offices would have been on the first floor, because that's what happens if we're in the inundation zone when you have a medium or large. If we were someplace else, then we can have done something. I don't know of anybody that's thought about, well, is there a way to go ahead and use your city hall and possibly, you know, develop clinic space or something? And not a full-blown clinic, but at least a place that you're not in a tent or in a transportation trailer, you know, to be able to go ahead and do that. So, but most places don't have the situation we have, that we're going to be on our own for as long as we are. And so I think that we have the opportunity to consider the whole building for what we would need in that kind of an event. And then just make it so that it's relatively easy to convert, has communications, and will be standing. Because I don't know how many buildings we've built in Cannon Beach that would be able to withstand a medium or a large earthquake and be operational. That's the Category 4 we keep talking about. If we have an entire Category 4 building, we have a place to go ahead and deal with things. And we don't have, otherwise we don't, like, you know, like Lila has to go home, and the MRC. And so I just think, you know, I'm just thinking of the whole building as being responsive.
Quick question. How is the 2-week formula, how did you come up with 2 weeks? And is that based on the worst case scenario?
That's a great question. I didn't come up with the 2 weeks. So the 2 weeks came from the governor of Oregon. And there was a challenge. At the same time, so the state emergency management division is pushing 2 weeks ready for the communities of Oregon. At the same time, the governor came out here recently and challenged the Office of Emergency Management at the state level to get 250,000 Oregonians prepared 2 weeks ready. So that everything is shifting to 2 weeks ready. I didn't come up with 2 weeks ready. If it was up to me, I'd tell you to be a month ready, and I don't have a formula for that either. But you know, even myself, I'm the emergency manager. You know, and right now, if something happened, I tell you, my van is 2 weeks ready, but my backpack in my van is 72 hours ready. So if I got to get on my feet, I guess I'm 72 hours ready. You know, and my wife's in Gerhard. You know, I guess she's 72 hours ready too. She's in a different spot. So I think the 2 weeks is relatively, for us, it was issued to us to be 2 weeks ready. But I'm also hearing this as I talk around, and I ask, how do I frame this? I talk to individuals that probably are in the know, you know, more leaning toward the military side, and they're saying the same things. It would be wise to be 2 weeks ready.
You know, I think something like is the 2 weeks, is that for like Beaverton, Hillsborough, Portland? Or is there a special number? Was that 2 weeks set for the people that are going to be out here on the
Right,
coast?
so,
Because, let me finish, Mike, because, Mike, let me finish. Because one of the things I know that they're starting to rely on is saying that Walmart and Costco and those people are very good at delivering goods. And so start to, you know, rely on them for their, and that's going to go ahead and define the parameters of your 2 weeks. They should be in business in 2 weeks. I would be curious if there is a number for specifically for the coastal communities, and if that number is 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would argue that number for coastal communities should be more. And so, in general, you know, I'm not a geologist. I'm also not from the federal government. So, you know, I'm your local emergency manager. So I'm going to tell you what my theories are. You know, the goods and services can only go so far via air, right? If I don't know, we can't get fixed wing in here, you know, your aircraft in here to Cannon Beach. Where the roads aren't going to be open, so nobody's coming by ground. And so the only other options are sea to shore or rotor wing. And your rotor wing, it can only go so far on a certain amount of limited fuel, and there's not going to be a lot of fuel sitting around, right? At fuel farms and that stuff's gonna be rationed. And so your rotor wing only gets you so far, it doesn't get you to the coast, right? So, and I've been told that our first contact may be from the sea. And we may get rotor from the sea, it may come from the Navy, we may get rotor, that's why I'm really looking at landing zones, and I want the state aviation plan to recognize that we have these landing zones to bring product on the assumption that we'll need it.
I heard Amazon does drones.
So, I mean, you get the gist, right? I mean, there's a lot, nothing's written down in stone, you know, these are going a little bit over what I probably should be talking about, so, you know, the 2 weeks is a generality coming from the state. I would argue on coastal communities, we should probably be a little even more than that, but I'm not going to issue that statement that we should be. I mean, 2 weeks is what we're being told by the state to be ready.
I want to jump in here. First, do a little housekeeping. Scott, I need your mailing address for Colleen's records.
Post office box 481.
I have a sign in. If anybody talks, you could just sign in.
Yeah, anybody has,
Because then I'll
I'll be
get the
up there.
spelling of your names and everything. That'd be really great.
Yeah.
yeah, sorry that this is a formal meeting, so got to maintain some of that. Beyond that, I would also like to remind everybody that when we're talking about 2 weeks, this is for the extra large. We have to also constantly remember that we got smaller emergencies that we will be able to handle, and trucks will be able to get here within days and stuff like that. So just don't want anybody panicking, and I don't see anybody out there that looks like they're panicking, but just in case. Okay, Lila, you had a question?
I had a comment, if I may.
I need your address then, or come up and sign up.
Holding, I'll write it down.
Okay.
So the first thing I wanted is, could everybody who's a CERT member, a Citizen Emergency Response Team, Medical Reserve Corps team member, or Disaster Animal Response Team person stand up? Sam?
That's why nobody's panicking. They've all,
Thank you, you can sit back down.
Thank you all.
But the first thing I'd like to say is, you know, we are fortunate enough to live in paradise. And paradise has some risks. And the risks are pretty evident, at least to me. And the thing that is most important to me, you know, co-coordinating the Medical Reserve Corps with Dr. Bob here, is we have to have a communication plan, and we don't. And we have to have a place that we can treat people and shelter people, and we don't. And I'd also like you to look through it another lens, which is the demographics of the people who just stood up. I'm just saying that 60-year-old plus people are not going to be able to tolerate an environment without any shelter. So that's my whole
Thank
game.
you, Laura.
I'm done.
And some people know, we are working on every one of those issues.
and another little bit that I would like to add to Scott's question, the history that I know of, the two-week program came from an OSPAC discussion that I was attended up at the airport where the Port of Portland is, and they had a big intensive meeting, and at that time the state was committed to a 24-hour go back. Literally, they wanted just 24 hours, and it took then quite a discussion to get to 72 hours. And after they did their massive amount of studies, especially what was going to happen to I-5, because that was what everybody was worried about, it wound up realizing that there aren't going to be any roads. And the state, as far as I know, they may have changed some of their thinking now, because that was several years ago. But the only access to the coast was 22. That was the only one they were going to open. They were only one they were going to put in work into, if anything happened. Don't ask me why. That has changed?
A little bit,
I figured it had, but I'm just giving a little history.
but it's 6 and 30,
6 and 30?
which doesn't help us much.
No, either way. So, Bob?
First, following on from
to the votes before the different votes are going to have here?
Great question. So, nothing formal. And they're, feds are pretty good about not giving me any formal information. So, there were Centers for Disease Control has some state pharmaceutical stockpiles for outbreaks, but they don't tell you where those things are positioned, they just tell you they are. And I'm getting the same kind of feeling from collection sites for material. I don't know what that, if you ask me what's the inventory, I don't know. I've heard rumors of places that are on the eastern Oregon side, and that is primarily to get product into Eugene, Salem, and Portland. But I did attend a meeting a month ago with the Department of Homeland Security. They'll be up here. Trying to get them to come up and visit me on the 9th and 10th of, well, it should be tonight or tomorrow. I'm hoping that they'll arrive. There wasn't a set deal. They're doing vulnerability assessments of Astoria. And the intent there, I think, is to make sure that they can bring a forward stage product. They call it a forward staging area. And whether they can actually get stuff there and position it. But they're not, it's all preliminary. So when you're into the meeting with something that's preliminary, the final outcome can be years away. So I would argue that no, I haven't heard where things are staged at. I would always assume that they are, but I'm not going to make those assumptions part of our plan. So right now, I don't know.
For that, you would want them outside of Cascadia.
That's correct. So they're looking at that product will probably be likely stored outside of the Cascadia shape zone, right? So we're looking stored someplace east part of Oregon. And then they would bring it.
California coast.
Or not, who they might shape too, right? So who knows? I don't know. I don't want to get too speculative. I just know, I don't know where they're located at. I have a lot of experience in these pharmaceutical stockpile side of things. I wrote the state of Nevada's pharmaceutical stockpile plan years ago. So I'm familiar with the way they think on the way they stockpile stuff around and can get it forward placement of product. But I can't tell you where raw material sits: food, water, saws, generators, fuel. I can tell you fuel will be rationed. There's no fuel plant. I know that for sure. They told me there's no fuel plant. And that means immediately fuel rationing will happen, and we're not getting diesel and unleaded. Bruce and I have been, Karen and I have been working on getting a couple fuel trailers to make sure we have diesel and gas just to keep front end loaders moving here to get debris moved and get rescue completed. So I do know we'll be without fuel, and so we're looking at how we might be able to bring that in.
At this point, thanks, Mike. I just want to let everybody know this is the beginning of the Mike Myers show. We're gonna have a lot of stuff going on, but we've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight, and I think we'll move on. So thanks all for showing up for this event, for this presentation.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a couple minutes to do a potty break, and then we'll move on. Thank you. I want to talk about forever, so I was surprised that we were able to limit it as we did. So we will move on to our next one, which is 2020 Vision. Jeff, you're presenting.
All right. I just want to make one request the next time I go after Mike, so that I have some audience. We took a blow there. Anyhow,
It's not you, Jeff.
yeah, he asked 2 weeks, Ray. I'm asking 20 years, Ray. That's my but I do see it as I'm glad Mike went first, because I see us as a team. It's a continuum of planning is what we do. And I really think if we're going to build the kind of community that survives any of this, it's both of us working together on these planning efforts. And so it's been great to have him aboard, and he is an optimist, and if it can get done, he's going to get it done. I was asked this: what are we trying to achieve, okay? And so I've said, I've been here now for a few months, and I've listened, and I hear these things. I hear, well, we want to review our plans. We want to kind of do a gap analysis. Where are we at with these plans? What do we need to do with the plans that we have? We want to do some community engagement, some outreach. so strategic planning, I think you guys have done some of that here fairly recently. And that process is usually, I mean, I think a lot of people look at it as kind of a linear process where you do this kind of assessment of what you've got, where you're wanting to go with things, and then how you build that plan and maintain it. But you'll see that last little bit there, there's a little arrow there. See that little thing? That thing sneaks back up over here. And if you look at any of these, that's what they are. They're this. And so if you do any kind of planning, strategic comprehensive planning, and you start out with that vision, you know, what you're really trying to do is build a cycle, a feedback loop that you're, whatever you do, are we making the progress where we want to go? And that's the key kind of takeaway in any of this. Whether this one comes from a office of strategic management, just how great would that be? To have an organization that actually has an office of strategic management that helps you achieve those goals and give you feedback. And I've worked with universities and things like that that do have those offices. Even offices of sustainability, or resiliency, even the military, you know, they have a lot of that.
That is part of what you do.
Yeah, exactly. I do. I'm doing it right now. And but any of those basically boil down to this, and it starts with that vision. Okay, you heard what I like to call, when I do a lot of my strategic planning or comprehensive planning, I'll do work sessions with, when we start and we build the story of our town, it starts with that vision, where we want to go. We've seen kind of those worst case scenarios, those things that can happen, tsunamis, the fires, and other things that Mike just spoke about, and that's why I talk about the continuum. Yeah, but where do we want to go in 20 years, 10 years? That's what that comprehensive plan, the vision that starts that process, the comprehensive plan that comes along, and then those bottoms, the strategic strategies that get you there and the tactics you have to use. The comp plan, this comes from our state's website, tells you, here's what you do with the comp plan. 3 things. Inventory of your local land uses and resources, goal and policy statements that indicate local objectives over a specific period, and guidance on how to achieve them. So not just, okay, here's your goals and objectives, but when do you want to get this thing done? When should we get there? And then detailed map that shows desired uses for each property throughout the entire locale. That's what's expected in a comprehensive plan for every community in Oregon. I want you to go on our website and find those 3 things, okay? That's your homework assignment, and next time we meet, I'm going to quiz you. And it has to align with these things. 18 statewide planning goals, from citizen involvement all the way to the economy of the state, open space, transportation, a lot of those things that you know, and the things that we deal with all the time, those estuarine resources, coastal shorelands, beaches and dunes. Our planning commission, in their guidance and what they're supposed to be doing from the state's perspective, and what's in our ordinance says, develop and maintain the comprehensive plan. So whatever we do with the comprehensive plan has to go through the planning commission first. They're our guiding organization or administrator on that. Investigate and make recommendations regarding the implementation of the comp plan, prepare and review land development regulations, including but not limited to zoning, subdivision, land petitioning, make recommendations to you folks. Okay, so they started and they takes it to you. This is what our actual planning commission's been doing since 1992 to 2018. And on the right side, it goes for everything from zoning, comprehensive plan changes, to zoning amendment changes, to zone changes, map changes, variances, vacations. And you can see we're doing about 1.5 cases per month at this rate. And you can see it's kind of dropped. We're doing less and less of these land use actions. What percentage? I know this looks like just a bunch of, looks like almost like a DNA thing. And that's what, you know, I'm the doctor looking at that. I'm the data guy. But it really boils down to pretty much 3 things that we're ending up doing if you were last 10 years. We do a lot of setback reductions, a lot of variances, and then zone changes. And so those are the kind of what the DNA of our city looks like. And so the comprehensive plan, well, this comes from our comprehensive plan philosophy and policy statement. And the one thing I want to point out here is this one right here. Comprehensive planning and subdivision ordinances are not fixed documents. Although the planning period for the city is generally considered to be the year, what does it say? 2000. That's what it says in our current comprehensive plan. Okay? So that right there, I mean, if I was a consultant coming out and say, why is this even still there? You know, I mean, so that tells you a little bit about how often we've done this and what are we doing. And so the city, like I said, back in 2017, a strategic plan. So we've done some recent strategic planning. How are you guys doing with your strategic plan? I'll ask you a question. On that loop that comes back, where are you on that loop? How often does that loop go around and you check back and get feedback?
You ever seen a figure 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. But we've got plenty of plans that we've updated fairly recently, from Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, Addendum, ECOLA, Creek Forest Reserve Stewardship Plan, Parks and Trails Master Plan, water, wastewater. So we're doing a lot of planning. So when you guys ask me, hey, maybe the first thing we do is do a kind of gaps analysis. Where are we and where do we stand with all these planning things? I also want you to know the state's not standing still. I mean, if you guys, if we're not doing any planning, I'll tell you the state's planning and they're moving. This is House Bill 2001. It's at committee level right now. I think tomorrow is the last day of work sessions and stuff, so we'll see what comes out of these. But 2001 is a very big one. This is the one where they're pretty much saying anything with an R1 zoning district, and this is for currently 10,000 population and above, but this is something we can gauge on what the state is going and where they're going. And they're saying any community 10,000 population and above, if you have R1 zoning, you can have up to quadplexes in those R1 by right. And so House Bill 2003 is every community at that 10,000 level or metro level also has to have a up-to-date housing inventory and land use inventory, and you're going to require these things, and then a policy action plan providing affordable housing. Senate Bill 621 is another one that proposed to get rid of short-term rentals. Last I heard is that's not going to make it out of committee. But each one of these things, there's a lot of stuff that's being proposed right now at the state level that could have impact on our comprehensive plan and on our plan going forward. So I was asked to kind of look at these things and what we might do over the next few years towards, next steps. And so I looked and started reaching out to, I've only been here a few months, but I have met, I've been sitting on the legislative policy group for the American Planning Association Oregon chapter. So made some connections, and I've also reached out to other planners and asked, okay, who's been doing some comprehensive plan work, who's been doing some visioning and strategic planning work, trying to look at cost, services for each one of these items. And I want you, this right here is Bend, Oregon. And there's a line down here that tells you how much they spent to do their last comprehensive plan update. Robin, can you read that number for me? $2 million. And for their last comprehensive plan update. I'm still in shock. Okay, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and the most I have ever seen is about $250,000, and that's for a big city. And Ben spent $2 million. And so I then called my friends in Lexington, Kentucky, who just finished their comprehensive plan update, called Imagine Lexington, and I had a conference call with 4 of them, and I said, well, how much did you guys spend? Oh, we did ours in-house. And so I said, well, I just got off the phone with Ben, and they spent $2 million, and they all went, what? I mean, we just laughed for days on that. But I'm telling you, this is a spectrum of how much people can pay. And when you have a good planning staff and you've invested, and I'm not saying Ben doesn't, they have a big planning staff. I think there's 12 or something in long-range planning alone. And then, but there's this large range out there, but I was referred to City of Sisters, which is a fairly comparable city to us, size-wise, and also it's a resort type of area. It's kind of, so I called him up and I said, well, hey, I heard you guys did some conference plan work for it. Well, they didn't do a conference plan update yet, but they're getting ready to. But they did do a vision, and their visioning cost them about $50,000, 46 or something like that. And so I, got some good references from all these folks that I reached out to, and I really appreciate it. Some great planners out there in Oregon, and Sisters is, like I said, they're budgeting up to go into the process. And I asked them, well, how much do you guys look in the budget? And so they're saying about $150,000. So when I look at this, how do you go about what we want to do in the future? Really, we're looking at a visioning process, and if we want to, I've got a timeline at the end, but I've broken it down. Visioning, I'd say around $50,000 or less, depending on how we want to do that. If you guys, there's the operations, some of these things I'll be talking about, some of it could be done in-house, but I would need some help. Okay, I can't by myself. But there's other professionals and others, kind of consultants that we could bring on to help us do something. Comprehensive planning, I would say it's $50,000 to $150,000 to do a comprehensive plan update. Depending on how much everybody wants to do with that. I think our first step, as I'll talk about in the timeline, is to do that review of how much do you guys think we need to accomplish. Third up is the strategic plan. So you do the vision, you get your comprehensive plan, which is your 30,000-foot kind of, hey, where are we going as a community? And then the strategic plan is that tactical plan for how the organization going to help us accomplish this comprehensive plan. And then ordinances, because once you change, you see where you want to go as a community, you've got ordinances to change to help you get there. And so that's another $50,000. And so those state expectations, like I said, those 3 things of the inventory, the goals, and the map, where do we currently stand on those things? And that's one of the things I wanted to say. People have asked us, where are we with that housing and buildable lands inventory? Well, we did one, I think, back, that's 2012 right there. And then we just recently with the Clatsop County, we have some pretty good data on that. I really don't think that's going to take us too much. Whereas then, I think that cost them over $250,000 or something just to do the development right here. And then goals and objectives. I want to point out with the goals and objectives here, it says right here in the development of the Cannon Beach Comprehensive Plan, it talks about this kind of came out in 1979, but the latest major revisions, they say 1984, and then they talk a little bit about 1986. Okay, and in our purpose, they say the purpose of the comprehensive plan is to control and promote development which is most desirable to the majority of the residents, property owners of the city. My favorite thing, Cannon Beach is not without controversy. I love that. I just want you guys to know that. If you did not know that, let's read that right there. It is the community in which citizens are concerned enough to become involved in phases of city affairs, and this involvement often leads to conflict. But what I really like about that is it's saying, and this is kind of what I've been involved in my career, is about building consensus, and often everyone's not going to agree, but we're going to take some major steps to get to where we need to go. So I'm a data geek. I don't know if anyone knows that. Okay? But I'm an admitted data geek. And so these over here, if anything blue is the first citation, red, second citation, up to 6 citations. So I took every clause from our comprehensive plan, and when did that clause enter, that citation enter our language of our comprehensive plan? Most of it, as you can see, happened back in 1979 and has withstood the test of time, right? These are the big updates ever that have happened since. What's happened here? We really haven't done hardly anything as far as comprehensive plan work since 19, as my grandma would say, 1998. Okay? 1998. So that's quite a span there with really not a lot of work done. So I'm a big word cloud guy. So, you know, that's the language. All of our collected, larger words, the more times it's used. Okay? So in 1979, fairly balanced. And I think one of the things I think you kind of get from this impression is, you know, we've got a lot of concerns. And I think it's a fairly balanced, especially if you look at this compared to 1996 and the language that entered our comprehensive plan in 1996. And you can see what was the big concerns in 1996 that we needed to update: transportation, highway. So this was all the language that had to enter to meet our new transportation or whatever goals were at that time. 2004, what we were concerned with in 2004, what's our, as a city? That's right, the COLA, estuary, nature. Not a lot of shalls. Okay, that's the other thing. See how shalls shrunk down to just that. And so this is our complete. So that's all the language that's in there. That's what we're dealing with day to day. And I know I deal with this every day. Permits, design, I protect, I require, and, you know, commercial. So I think you can learn a lot from the language of what you're doing. You can also learn a lot from how often it's updated and where it's taking you as a community and where it gets to be statewide planning goes and how often those things are updated. So this is the actual map. So when I ask you to do your homework and go home and just find those 3 things, this is what you would find on our website. This is our map. And this is, if you look at the Oregon guiding, this is it. This is what we base our guidance on and all of our ordinances. The detailed map of the city of Cannon Beach. And that's, I last updated, I can't even tell you. And so here's the different existing sewer, these are the maps that are on our website. And right there it can tell you, May 1991. Okay, so planning for Cannon Beach and where we want to go. I've kind of given a timeline of how we might get to where we're wanting to go. And I didn't even, as you can see, I ended a couple years out the strategic plan initiative kickoff. But I really think that what we really need to do is kind of pull together the buildable lands from the Clatsop County housing study that we're getting. See how much we have left to do on that. I don't think we have that much left to do. So pull that together because that gives us kind of our base analysis of where we are with what's left vacant and left buildable and where we can go as far as that. Second is the plans review. I really think sometime this summer we do need to get together with our comprehensive plan and our strategic plan and those other plans and do an analysis of where we are with each one of those things. And then in the fall, start contracting for a Vision 2020 is what I call it. I just think that's pretty clever. And the funniest thing though, the very first one of these things I ever did was in Blaine County, Idaho, many moons ago. get 20 years out to 20, and, you know, now it's here, you know? So anyhow, but that process, you know, that's a 1.5 year process, you know, to get finished with that. Then you move into that comprehensive plan work, that's another 1.5 years, year and a half, and then I think you take a little breather and start into that strategic plan. So I was just told to do a first touch because I think that, you know, there's a lot I know you guys want to do, and I really think that we have a great team staff-wise, a lot of great professionals, and I think these things all look, oh, they're just daunting, we don't really want to do, yeah, it's just too much to do. They can be. It's like you take the elephant, you know, and I think you can take the small bites to get us where we want to go. And I'm someone who has done many of these, like I said, in many different companies. I love doing them. I really think that I like Mike's approach of kind of community, neighborhood level type of things. I think we can work emergency planning into comprehensive planning as it's all one part of one large network. And if you, I challenge you as part of that homework assignment, go to your comprehensive plan and try to find the word tsunami. It not exists. Okay? Number 2, try to find the word wildfire or earthquake. There's none of that. None of it's in the comprehensive plan. So we've got an emergency management professional now. He's got to have something to do. So anyhow, any questions, Joe?
Questions?
And I'd just like to make a comment.
Yes.
Well, and I just stepped out with Timo and Lori, and the idea is, what do we want to budget? Because that was kind of a little bit of this discussion. I know that Brandon had a question about how this was all going to fit together, but from our standpoint, do you want to start in the 2019 budget to start some of these processes? And do you want us to maybe make a proposal as part of the budget, or are there certain things that you say, yes, I would like to do this one and this one, and then we can try to figure how long it's going to be? Like, I think based on what you were talking about, is the $200,000 for the visioning and for the comp plan, that may be over 2 years or 1.5 years or something.
Exactly.
So just to have, if you want to go down that road, which sounds like Jeff is recommending that we do, and y'all had already asked about this, so I think you want to do it. I want to make sure that we have something in the budget so that we can go ahead and, might not be real specific, but at least a placeholder to say this is for our planning effort. I'd just like your comments on that.
I would like to see it, but I'd also like to kind of follow up on what I asked for, if there's consensus among the council in moving forward with this. I know it seems a little bit daunting to see those numbers, to add them all up, quite a bit of money. But you know, I assume that since Jeff took the time in the presentation to show that multiple years out, we'd be probably putting in anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 a year over a 3 or 4 year period, or do you spend a longer amount of time paying it off and not through this process?
Yeah, I anticipate if you're looking at probably 75,000 a year kind of for 2 years. That's really, you know, what I'd say the projection is.
You know, also, if we put this in the budget and we start July 1st, then it's going to take us 90 days if we started on that day. It's going to take us 90 days or 120 days to hire a consultant. So we really aren't talking about spending the whole year. It may be an 8-month process is where the funding requirement would be.
And Mike, I would think that, you know, if you do your visioning and your comprehensive plan, those first 2 kind of steps, you may get to that and you may not really need or want to do a strategic plan. A lot of communities don't. You know, that's part of, the comprehensive plan will have often a 5-year work program or something that's associated with that, and how you choose to do that, and what the organization or consultant might
I'm very much in support of proceeding with the comprehensive plan and the visioning. I feel like we always fall down when it comes to strategic planning. Reviewing past strategic plans, they're still sitting out there. Some have been done, some haven't, but there's not been, quote, the plan for those strategies. So I can see why maybe some, especially smaller communities, might forego the, quote, strategic plan because they're small enough, and we can't tend to deal with those events as they come. If we have a good comprehensive plan and vision, I think we can deal with the necessary strategies as they come, rather than spending a lot of money on strategic plan and goal setting that we're going to ignore because something more important comes up. But setting a budget, I think, like Brandon suggested, certainly get started on that this budget session.
Would you like us to put in, say, $75,000, and we'll title it Vision Plan, Strategic Plan, or Visioning or something? We'll just put it in there, and then we can have further conversations, after budget time, or maybe during budget time, is the specifics that we're looking for. And if we do want to go ahead and put that in the final budget.
Yeah, I think we should put something in there. It may be that as we look at all of our other demands, so like we keep adding one more thing,
Right, sure.
50,000 here, 75,000 there. I'd like to see all those put together, and we may have to shift some of those around.
Right. So I want to put
But
something in,
at
so
least
we don't talk
put a-
about it later. And
Put a
try to
place
find the money.
marker in it.
Okay. I mean, is that acceptable?
I'm okay with a placeholder as long as we all understand that the discussion of what that is going to entail comes later. I think that is something that I've run into in the past about, oh, it's in the budget, we have to do it. And we have to be real careful of that. So I just want to make sure that I have no problem with comprehensive plan reviews. I'm a little leery of jumping right into consultants again. I am getting really tired of consultants. So the plans review and the buildable lands study, and I think some comprehensive plan review would be really good. And I'm looking forward to that.
Well, my concern is that when we're making a comparison with Bend, we're 1,750 people, they're 100,000.
Yeah, I wasn't.
So and then Sisters, using that too, I just worry about spending a lot of money on it.
I don't know, I don't want to compare it to Ben, I was just saying, there's a big range out there from 0 to, some odd. Sisters is more, you're gonna look at similar type size, style.
Do you know the population of Sisters?
Barb?
2020.
About.
Approximately.
So, and that just, those are the only two I brought up. I mean, it's not like
Right.
I didn't review others. Being a data guy, I can get you the individual quotes.
Well, in that process, we really need to make sure we're following state requirements on updating our comprehensive plan. That's got to be foremost.
Well, I think, one of the reasons that we haven't done it is because we fall under an exemption.
The 10,000 population, right.
Right.
And so, I agree that the document is good, it serves the community well, but to not update it, I just think is negative.
Yeah, they let you off the hook because of your size, but that doesn't mean you should just ignore it for 20 years.
And maybe it wasn't really being ignored, maybe some of the things we're doing are okay.
That's why we have a review. See, are we okay? Are we following, let's say, at least the intent of comprehensive plan review?
Even just to go through and look at the language. Jeff pointed out several points where, yeah, it needs updating in that sense too. So, any other concerns? I would,
Want to make sure I have direction.
that you're pretty good consensus to put something in the budget.
Okay, something, $75,000 with a placeholder?
Yeah. I think 75 might be a little high, that's just me.
Okay, what's one?
Thinking 50.
I would probably, put 50 in, but again, I'm thinking the bulk of it's going to happen in 2020 if we actually move forward.
Whatever, again,
But-
whatever you would like. So I'm hearing two numbers.
Yeah.
50 or 75.
I'm going to go 50 for the first year. And we can, I mean, the budget committee is going to be discussing it anyway.
Right, yeah, okay.
Oh.
All right, so we'll put 50,000 in a placeholder for visioning and comp plan.
I have two little comments that I noticed when one of your word map things, I noticed Les Wearson's name. Did you catch that? That was kind of intriguing. The other one is the language of Cannon Beach having conflict. That was put in by Colleen's predecessor, May McCoy. I remember hearing about that and the fact that somebody was wanting that cut out, and she said absolutely not, and she just went ahead and put it in.
Power to the recorder.
Yeah. She was also the entire city staff at the time.
All the better.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good job.
We're going to move on to our next item, Cola Creek Forest Reserve, update from the Parks Committee. Julianne?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm here with the Parks Committee and with other members of the committee attending. And really our intention this evening, we wanted to, speaking about plans and updates and looking ahead, we as a committee are in the process of a 5-year plan review for the Ecola Creek Forest Reserve Stewardship Plan. This plan was developed with a great deal of care. It's a comprehensive stewardship plan. It was initially completed in 2013, and part of our agreement with OWEB and part of the guidelines in the plan is that we do an update every 5 years, and that is what we're in the process of. So we wanted to give you guys a brief update tonight, though we are in the process, and to let you know that we've really been in this process and expect it's going to be continuing for some months. But we also recognize you're in budget conversations, and we want to be looking ahead to that and let you know where we are in the process and what we're foreseeing at this point in the process. And then we look forward to coming back once we have more specifics, and we can talk with you in more detail after we've completed our review. By way of maybe framing, the initial stewardship plan identifies priorities for activities in the reserve and really recognizes that our primary responsibility and activity in the reserve is as preserving it as a watershed. It is our watershed, and we have this beautiful reserve that we also are able to visit and spend time in, but that the priorities for restoration in the reserve have to do with restoring the ecosystem of the forest, maintaining the water quality in the reserve and in the watershed. That includes fish habitat, sustaining and improving the fish habitat. And then there are other activities that are anticipated in the reserve, education being one, both for the community. It's a wonderful source of education about a forest ecosystem and watershed, and also educating the public about being in a watershed and how that might be different than some other public spaces and the considerations that we want to have there. And then access to the reserve in ways that are described as passive and consistent with those first-tier priorities of conservation and restoration. So as I mentioned, we're in the midst of our first 5-year update. We're have been working with city staff and with Trout Mountain Forestry, and they have produced a wonderful draft update on the initial action items and projects from the initial plan. So we've been working with Barry Sims and Trout Mountain Forestry, along with city staff from the last part of last year to go and visit the reserve, to consider each of the areas of projects and activity in the reserve, and now have a draft update where we can look in detail at each one of those actions to look at the status. Some have been completed, some are ongoing, and what we anticipate coming up in the future. Some examples of the stewardship projects. We would anticipate continuing with selective conifer thinning. This was something that was first started earlier in the plan, has been very successful in terms of opening up some areas for then to plant cedar and more of the native tree species. And part of this update, it's been wonderful to see that a lot of those cedars are thriving and are doing very well. So we want to continue, and there have been some recommendations in terms of areas that we could continue that kind of activity. Releasing cedar that are already making their way, but hemlock also competes with that, so being able to continue to support the more diverse and natural ecosystem. Another example of a project that we're looking at would be an updated fish survey. So there was a survey, fish survey, snorkel survey done in 2009. That data was incorporated into the initial master plan. And it is now time with this 5-year update, we feel, to see where things stand now. There have been some significant efforts at fish habitat improvement. It would allow us to take a look at that and to see what the fish runs are looking like. So that's another example of a project. And another area in terms of restoration and habitat is beaver, establishing beaver forage and some of the initial steps to bring beaver back into the reserve, again, with the eye of establishing that natural ecosystem, all connected to having a healthy watershed. So the draft update that we've been working with from Trout Mountain does include some initial estimates for some of these types of projects. And based on those estimates and what we anticipate for projects that we'll be considering coming up, and in terms of our recommendations to the council, we're asking the council to consider a line item of $50,000 for the continuation and expanded work up in the reserve in terms of our forest restoration and really in all of those areas. We'll also be seeking grants wherever available to help support this. We feel that this will really allow us to plan and sequence the projects in the reserve. So it's sometimes the case that if we're moving into a particular area, we might be able to maximize the effectiveness and the cost effectiveness if we're looking ahead at laying a foundation for perhaps the next project or something else that's going to be happening in that area. So we really want to be able to be thinking systemically and looking in the big picture at how we can connect up our efforts so we're not duplicating efforts and duplicating activity. We feel that the value of the efforts that we can make now can really pay tremendous dividends over time. This is, again, our watershed. It's a precious resource, and all of the work that we can do and the actions that we can take today can really support that preservation going forward. So we just wanted to give you an eye as to where we are. We'll be continuing our review over the coming months and working with staff actively to refine that, and then we look forward to coming back when we have the specific projects we'd like to do and seasonally where we're looking at that, and we can come back with some more specific numbers for you then. Be happy to answer questions or any comments. There's one other thing just related. It says related to watershed and water quality, though it isn't specific to our plan review, but just a word as you're considering activity in that area. We are aware that the city's considering possibly acquiring the recharge area, and we feel like this is something that would also very much support the kind of work that we're doing up in the ECFR as a city, and really blends together with the kind of work that we hope to be doing in the future and that we'll be bringing to you for consideration. So wanted to mention that as one of the things that's on our radar, and we know it is on yours as well. Any questions that I can answer, or other members of the committee, or?
I have one.
Yes.
So for the line item amount that you're asking for, do you anticipate that as something that you'd need to spend in a year, or is that something for ongoing projects for the next 5 years?
Yeah. I think that the answer is somewhere realistically in the middle. We are going to be continuing with this plan process for this year, and we'd like to be able to anticipate and make plans for some of those larger scale projects, which may be ongoing. Some of them are going to be more discrete and short term, and we will be able to come back to you with those specifics. So certainly if we anticipated that for this year we wouldn't be completing some of that, that money would be set in reserve. But we are trying to look at the scope of work that we anticipate we can plan for. And some of that may be in this initial year, but we don't exactly know how long our review is going to take and when we can start getting bids on some of that specific work. So thinking, these are numbers that we have for work that we know we would like to do, and then the question in terms of the actual timeline for that, I think, is not entirely clear, but we can certainly come back as we know more.
Okay.
and do that. So I think we're wanting to let you know what we're anticipating as you're thinking about budget, and I know this may be more a placeholder at this point, but we also do have some rough numbers for the forest restoration projects, and that's the
Thank you.
ballpark it falls into. Yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Some direction.
Bruce?
Are you folks good with us putting in a placeholder for the budget for $50,000 for future projects?
I am.
Okay, all right, good. All right, thank you. Put that in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, next item, ordinance revision, Kennebec Street Standards. Karen?
Last month at the March 12th meeting, you guys had made a few revisions to the draft copy of the street standards that I brought to you at that time. So those revisions are noted in the staff report under the Article B1. Item 2 was reworded for more clarity. And then item 4, we removed because you didn't feel that item we needed to bring it back to the council for your review again. So those are the only 2 changes I made. And if you're okay with those, then I will bring it back to you for an official vote.
Looks like you covered everything we talked about.
I'm sorry,
Looks like you covered everything we talked about for the next meeting.
I don't think I did a very good job conveying to you guys last month about why we would actually deny a request to pay based on additional work. And it was really based on if we had to do, I always use presidential as a good example. If somebody were to come and talk to us about paving one of the gravel streets, the presidential is knowing that we're going to have massive line replacements that our master plan has identified. And there's storm drain work there, and there's sewer I&I work there. I wouldn't even consider that project, even if the entire neighborhood wanted to pay, it would sound a little better, so hopefully that helped you understand that. All look good there.
I had a couple of minor questions.
Sure.
On D, let's see, what is this? Under the 12.42 restrictions, what page is that? I don't think it has a page number on it. But it says, no person shall, this is not part of the changes actually, but it just says, no person shall set up or operate a powered public address system. And then it goes on with, but with the, may be operated at the bandstand at the city's.
Nancy?
park.
Actually,
What?
we're on the roads.
Oh, what am I doing? Well.
That's why I couldn't find it.
This is the park code.
The parks.
Never mind.
That's right, hold that here a second.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. I guess I missed I skipped something. Okay. Yeah, well, I'm always trying to get the
She's anxious.
meeting going a little bit faster.
Yeah, I do that.
So we're good with this, I'll bring you back to
Yeah.
you next month for
I think so.
meeting for a vote.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, then we'll move on to the ordinance revision, park code and animal code.
So, same draft you last month, and the section that was revised is 12.42.040, letter E, Parks Code.
Can I suggest something there? Okay, because it says that under the city manager's approved event permit, would it be appropriate to say for a limited time period?
Or that designated
In other
time
words,
period.
yes, yeah, because I think this would be a special item anyway, and to acknowledge that it would be only for a very short time.
You know,
What section is that?
She's on letter E.
I know when I was on the planning commission for the county, we reviewed all of the festivals and that sort of thing, and those had very specific timelines.
and I seem to remember when they discussed this, when the city council discussed this a few years ago, they had a specific, I think it was like 8 hours.
Yeah, it's
It was a real short timeline. And I don't know where that even is in this. I didn't see that in this, but it seems to me it was a real short timeline. Maybe they took it out.
I vaguely feel like we talked about taking that out just because it meant, if you had a 2-day event, you had to come back and reset everything up. So,
Well, wouldn't the state supersede that anyway?
not for
And
our,
that's where it is. That's what we were reviewing, that's what the state is recommending.
We added the wording to reference that specific time frame for that event permit that was issued. So whether it was for a 2-day or for just an 8-hour event, that approval would only be for that designated time, but nothing outside that.
Right.
It would kind of address Sam's point of saying there's a cause of the setup and breakdown of setup and, would that work?
I think so. We'll see.
But Robin, to your point, maybe we should be thinking about a time frame for the tear down. So that, like, if it's a Saturday, Sunday,
It would be for the event.
right, but that there's something in there that says Sunday night, it's all gone. So that it doesn't go over to Monday or Tuesday or something. Maybe we can look at that so that it's, kind of like farmer's market, we don't leave it up for the next day.
Right.
So, yeah.
That would be in the event.
Yeah. So that would be in the permit, so that'd be covered.
Karen, I have a comment on section I on that same page, I believe.
I was ready for this one.
Okay. The very end of that, it gives the areas where you can have horses, and the very end of it says, "and streets designated as bridle paths."
Yes.
And I'm not aware of any streets that have ever been designated as a bridle path, nor
We're
that one
starting.
included.
I'm not aware of any hard surface streets that are designated as bridle paths. I think it was
could, though, I'm trying to think of a possibility in the future, that we do have some unimproved streets through town where trails are, could be, inserted or something like that. I can't think of any really off the top of my head right now, but it is still a street, even though it's not improved. And horses are allowed on streets in their general sense. I don't know. I don't know why the term bridle path is in there, because I can't imagine where that came from.
Like you said, if the city wanted to have that, you could change it from street to right of way. If there were unimproved areas that you wanted to allow horses, since it's not a street, kind of a state street, then that would allow that to happen.
That could, almost relate to the beach access points too. 'Cause some of those are just trails, but they are still streets.
So you make that exception for public right-of-ways, it conflicts with the first part of that statement, which prohibits it from public right-of-way.
Yeah, because isn't a street a public right-of-way?
Unless it's not, it was approached to get as designated as a bridle path. That's what it says. So if you claim it as a bridle path as a state, you can, then that right on.
If you do that, then you need to get into who and how and when does such a right-of-way get designated, and how is it marked, and how do people know, and it opens up another can of worms. I'd rather just see it.
I don't know what your intent, I was just saying that.
Yeah.
That was when I read that, that's what it looked like to me, that they were reserving that right. I don't think they get some time to get them.
Any comments from the Parks Committee members? Julie? Barb?
We're just wondering if end streets were removed so that it read Cocoa Creek Forest Reserve designated and designated bridle paths, which at this point I don't think we have other than the one going to the beach, but in the future that would allow that designation to be made, but at this point it would also keep it clear as a street.
That's good.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Just strike street and as,
Okay.
so just
Yeah.
designated bridle paths, which we have none now, but have some in the forest reserve.
Okay. Nancy?
I had a couple questions on this.
Surprise.
Yes, ma'am. And actually, on I did have a couple of questions on that. It says no horses shall be allowed in a parking lot. This is city-owned parking lot, right? I'm thinking of the parking lot behind the Coaster Theater, which is not a city-owned parking lot. Because I had to wait for a horse just to get into a parking space the other day. So horses would be allowed, for instance, in parking lots that are not city-owned?
Private property.
Okay, so private, okay. And then, isn't a street a public right-of-way?
Well, technically, it's a public way, but the right of way is the side of the street.
Oh, the side of the street,
That's
okay.
what cares, but yes.
All right. Well, it just says, that sounds like horses wouldn't be allowed to walk on the streets then. So you're prohibiting horses from walking on the street?
That's what the
Being ridden.
Public Works, or the Parks Committee would have to propose, yes.
Does Bob Wayne know about that?
Bob is going to talk here shortly. I also question that because the street is a legal road, and horses are considered legal vehicles in the state of Oregon. And so they are allowed to walk on the streets by the state of Oregon. So we should not be disallowing that. And I did not read it that way. So if that's what the intention is, we're going to scratch that.
And
Okay, then I won't go for that. Because it can't say that.
And then,
What does the state say about cleaning up after your animals on a public road?
Well, last month, you guys mentioned this to me, and I was not in attendance at the last Parks Committee, so I'll go on record saying staff and the committee had a difference of opinion on this. I felt like Dr. Wayne and I had worked out a good compromise, and I was not in the last committee meeting, and there's more than there is me, so this is what I brought forth to you, that we can always review it and discuss it again. I think it's something that might, I think a little more discussion could find a good happy medium for both parties.
Okay, maybe we should do that.
I think the cleaning up is something that I am very concerned about, and I think Dr. Wayne was agreeable to stopping the horses like a lot of municipalities require. But I also know that the Parks Committee had some concern over traffic disruption and things that have gone on in the community that I haven't been a party to, that maybe Lieutenant Chris can share with us, something that may have been reported to the police that I'm not aware of. So I have to consider the input of the committee, and they felt that that was a concern of safety.
Okay,
So I'll take that for a little more discussion, maybe have one of our officers in the committee meeting to give us some information about incidents that have happened in the past and bring it back to you.
okay.
and I did have one other question. On D, even though it's not part of the revisions, it talks about written permission from the director, and I'm wondering who the director is? Is that old language from when the city had a parks director, and should that be changed?
I assume that that was the director, they route the events permits through the directors for sign-off, so if you're talking about music in the park, we do talk about what kind of amplification that people often ask for and what's available at the back stand there.
I'm just wondering if it should say with written permission from the city manager, because we don't have.
It
There's
says
a-
right here, director means the person designated by the city manager.
Right?
Yes.
So the police signs off, and it comes to me as a public works director, I just assume that that's
Oh,
what
and definition.
the committee was
Okay.
referring to there.
All right.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
Yeah, Bob, now, you want to have a comment?
My name is Bob Wayne. I live in County Beach for like 40 years. It's a real privilege to ride horses in town. I recognize that. And sometimes I push the envelope a little bit with my horses because I give a lot of rides to kids, and you know, I use it as a social vehicle as well, and it's a real privilege. I mean, I think I'm the only person that rides in town, probably. So I've tried to be real careful about it, but like I say, once in a while it gets a little edgy. Jason texted me this week that somebody had a problem with traffic in town, and I know exactly what it was. I was giving a kid a ride down Main Street, which I've been doing off and on for years, and it could easily be done on a side street. I let the kids get up in the saddle. It's a little local color. It's fun for the public. The kids really enjoy it. But again, I have I'm the only one that does this, so there's no real other person to support what I do outside of it's a little local color for your town. That's what I would say. And the public generally enjoys it. I have a good rapport with Jason over the poop situation. Generally on the beach, I take it off, but sometimes if it's a bad spot, I might bury it, but I have to bury it. But generally, he wants me to take it off. And on the streets, I've always taken it away and put it someplace out of the side. Now, once in a while, someone wants me to go back in their garbage can and get it out, because it is, you know, it's to some people, it's offensive. But again, I try to be sensitive as I can to the people that are around me, but it's a tricky balance. There's no question about it. And at some point, maybe I'll lose that privilege. Riding on the beach is certainly another choice for sure, and I do ride that preserve of yours a lot. I'm up in those hills a lot, and I hope that I can be careful with my horses up there too. I don't usually pick up their poop. I may shove it to the side of the road, but if it turns out to be a problem, there's no trouble getting off my horse and shoving it in the bushes or taking it with me. I mean, that's all part of getting the privilege to ride. So I just wanted to let you know that I really recognize it's a privilege, and I'll try to be careful about it and keep my rapport with Jason and the police department as far as managing the situation, and hopefully I'll be able to continue.
Dr. Lane, can I ask you a question about insurance? How do you protect yourself if you have kids on there or your horse were to rear up and hurt somebody accidentally?
That's always a potential, and I've been willing to kind of accept it, but my lawyer got on me about it recently, and I bought a separate policy that has to do with you're not a professional giving rides to people. You're letting people that, you're letting other people ride. It's like a farm policy. Yeah, and I took that out to cover myself pretty good for any of that kind of stuff. And, I've been pretty lucky over the years as far as, because they're big creatures. I mean, we have them in parade every year, and they're the kids were under them sometimes when they're going for candy. But I try to be conscious of it because it's a privilege. That's all there is to it. I'm very, very lucky. I don't know what to say, but it's only been going on because you haven't really felt it was a problem. So I hope that, I can follow whatever rules you lay out for me and still have that privilege. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
Aaron, I have a question also included under the horse issue is a section proposed animal code or ordinance revisions. It just identifies 6.0X horses. But would it not be appropriate at this time or following up on animal codes to address people feeding wild animals, raccoons, deer, elk, bunnies, feral cats, and because there's nothing in there about under nuisance or animals except that you have to keep your dog on a leash and pick up their poop. It seems that is becoming a larger and larger issue, and most common thought is that it's the people feeding the raccoons and the bunnies. There's not some people even feed or try to feed the elk, and those are all they're hazardous to the people. They're a nuisance to the public, and I would like to see some kind of a language worked up to suggest an ordinance on prohibiting feeding of wild animals. I would think accepting wild birds or bird feeders might be appropriate.
Everybody okay?
So you're saying bird feeders would be okay?
Yeah, but
Sam, I just want to add that Jason recently gave me a list of laws in Oregon. I should give it to you all to see about horses on roadways. It documents exactly how, my responsibility to the public to be out, not to stop traffic and to do whatever it takes. It talks about not only horses, but if you had cattle in town or whatever. So I'll get that to you because it's actually in Oregon code. I just didn't bring it tonight.
Get it to Colleen.
I will. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Back to where we were. Bird feeders. You got what Mike was bringing for. Okay.
you have a question, give me a call. There may be others. I just, off the top of my head, suggested the raccoons, rabbits, elk, deer, feral cats, et cetera.
I guess my only, I'm totally agreement with Mike, except what we're looking at is the park code. I don't know if that's the right place for it. It makes sense in the parks, so yeah, maybe it does.
There's another place under our code that's just called animals,
Yeah,
and it only addresses dogs at this point.
okay.
I think that'd be appropriate.
We can look at putting some language in there that broadens that more.
Right.
Give us time based on some people bringing issues to us.
Maybe abandoning animals might be included there.
Okay then. Any last questions for Karen?
Oh, I was just going to say, actually, these are two separate ordinances that would come to you. One for parks, code changes, and
Right.
one for animal code changes.
Correct.
Right. And right now, the Cannon Beach Street Standards is good to go, and we'll probably see that soon. The animal code, park code, goes back to parks, and so they can discuss it some more. Okay. I also want to note, just for Bob's sense, Bob is not the only horse rider that lives here in Cannon Beach. We have two other folks I know of that ride frequently. So, and they just never pass, I guess. Okay. That concludes our agenda. For anybody have anything for good of the order?
I just have two items.
Bryce? Bruce?
First one, I guess this would be interpreted as good news. We have a meeting set for April 15th to discuss rates, and we are not quite ready. We're still waiting for one additional scenario, and so I would say that we would be in good position if we were to cancel on the 15th, because we wouldn't be able to have a complete discussion. Also want to let you know that as we're going through the rate discussion and talking about how we would present that to council, it's more complicated than what I comprehended, and so it may take a while for us to get the rates all the way through, as far as any changes that might occur. And just as a heads up, it may be that this year the budget deals with rates as they are now, or we push out any changes in the rates to a point that we can actually have enough of a discussion, because there are some potential significant changes where one user group goes down, but to be revenue neutral, somebody else's has to go up. And in some of those cases, those can be significant. So I'm trying to anticipate what the issues are and try to make sure we have time before you see it to talk to the various user groups. Then it might take a little bit more time. But initially, the only thing is of concern is that the meeting on the 15th is canceled for that, and we'll continue to try to get the rates to you. But it might. There's other things. You're aware there's other things going on, and some of those. Like what? It may take some time, right? Yes. The other thing is that I appreciate Mike's presentation tonight on emergency management. And in the past, we've had, or actually now, we have different advisory committees, working together on this. And one group that seems to be missing is council. And so what I would like is to ask council to appoint someone to be the liaison, so that when CERT, MRC, and other groups like the chamber is involved with that we have someone from council there also, just as a liaison. And I think the mayor has expressed interest.
I was going to say,
Everybody's looking to Sam to do that.
would be perfect.
Yeah, we've kind of assigned that to me before, and it never kind of evolved, but I would be more than happy to do that.
And my reason for bringing it up is since I've been here, we've not had the mayor there. In fact, I don't know if nobody invited me or if these people are leaving the meeting, but now that we are more active, I think that would be great if Sam could. Okay, those are my two items. Thank you.
Okay. Arbor Day is on the 12th. 12 Days of Earth Community Potluck is on the 19th. Wanted to do those two things. And then I had one question for Chris. Two folks have come to me and said that they have spotted a bobcat in town, two separate sightings. I was just curious if the Night Watch has seen a bobcat at all.
Not that any of the officers have said. We've gotten some calls in where people reporting seeing large cats around.
Okay.
Did call up and talk to the OSP Fish and Wildlife Sergeant, and he said, these things are pretty common where we live, so it's just kind of part of our environment.
I think that's nature taking care of one of our other problems, so hopefully. Yeah. Okay, just curious.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one other thing. When you were talking about the 12 Days of Earth Day events, also on the 20th, there's the street fair, and we've modified the permit so that we will be closing 2nd Street from Hemlock to Spruce. We lost the use of the bank parking lot. It was getting more and more remote, and it kind of didn't look like a street fair, it looked like a parking lot fair. So we will be making that venue change. We've contacted all of the businesses along there. All are supportive.
Cool.
And Robin and I have our coffee with the counselors session on Monday from 10 a.m. until 11 a.m. or until we get tired of talking, I guess. So you're all welcome to join us, or somebody, whoever wants to join us can. We talk about a variety of subjects that you bring up. So we're just here to listen and to discuss them with any concerns with you.
Colleen? Did you have?
We still have a work session on the 24th scheduled?
Yes, yes, and that is subject to the reports being complete. If we need to change that date, I will be letting you know.
Is that contingent upon what you've just said about the rates being,
No, the one on the 24th is City Hall.
okay. Will that be is that a Wednesday?
Yes,
Okay.
it is a Wednesday, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Certainly
Okay,
is a
good.
Wednesday, yes.
I'm having trouble keeping up my dates.
And-
That was with the 2 additional scenarios. Great.
And I intend to go to the Cedar Awards dinner, if anybody else is going.
I'll be going also.
Jim is going. Cool. Okay. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.